Rabbi Barkley, who is somebody I respect, because he went to Dodger Stadium with a group of Catholics to go and pray there when the Dodgers were promoting this blasphemous display, okay, that they were doing. Rabbi Barkley, considered to be a person of goodwill, he joined the Catholics there, and that is what I see as a really good thing in terms of having a good relationship. He's a conservative rabbi. He's there with a bunch of Catholics. Now, my point is this, though. I also saw him in an interview where he was asked, well, what is anti-Semitism? And he didn't answer the question. Now, from somebody like me, if I'm supposed to, and I want to have a good relationship with our Jewish brothers and sisters and have real dialogue, we have to define our terms. His answer to I believe it was Candace Owens. I know it's controversial just to mention her name, but the thing is, he said, well, we can't just define anti-Semitism because it evolves. I find that to be a very empty answer, Dr. DaCosta, because if you're asking me, if you're saying that we ought not acting in this way, meaning you ought not be, and the church, by the way, condemns anti-Semitism. But here's my question, Doc. I'm going to hand it right over to you. I don't know what anti-Semitism means. I think you know where I'm going, so I would throw it over to you and help me out a little bit.
Yeah. Okay, so we've mentioned Pius's comments connected with spiritual Semites in his resistance to anti-Semitism. In 1965, in the document Nostra Aetate, we get the clear statement that the Church condemns all forms of anti-Semitism. And it was a shame you weren't there at the council, Joe, because you could have stood up and said, hey, what does that mean? And I think it's a genuinely good question. I mean, one of the most controversial definitions relates to the International Holocaust Remembrance Association definition that to speak about the state of Israel and question its legitimacy is anti-Semitic. Now, this is a very interesting definition of anti-Semitism because not everyone accepts it. And there are many Jews who don't accept that as a definition. They say, hey, you've got to be able to argue whether the state of Israel is legitimate or not. And if you do so, you shouldn't be called anti-Semitic. And this is just my personal opinion here. Sometimes when I listen to Benjamin Netanyahu's response to many, many criticisms made of Israel, and immediately he brings out the charge that it's anti-Semitic to say X, Y, Z, you begin to lose traction. Is everything that is to ever be said about Jews in any context that you don't like, can you call that anti-Semitic? It's not helpful. Okay, so you asked me, what is the definition of anti-Semitic? And I would say this is a controversial question which needs to be responded to by the church itself. Now, on the question of the existence of Israel, we know that the Catholic Church officially accepts its legitimacy under the UN and international law. It argues from a natural law position that it has a right to exist. In 1993, it established diplomatic relationships with Israel. The Catholic Church also, much to the annoyance of the Israeli governments, established relationships with the Palestinians, recognizes a Palestinian state, and has a fundamental agreement with the PLO. So you've got this kind of attempt for the Catholic Church to think through what is anti-Semitism. And in one sense, your friend who says it's an evolving discussion has a point because constantly different problems come up. So Pope Francis was called anti-Semitic by some critics because of his attitude towards Gaza when the war broke out. And again, it seems to me a bit difficult. There was one issue as was he being equal in his treatment of both parties, which is a legitimate question. But secondly, was he isolating certain sorts of Jewish terrorism, the word that he used once, in a way that might have been seen as unbalanced, connected with the actions that were going on. Okay, so for definitional point of view, I would say, and now I stick my neck out and you can very happily chop it off. My definition of anti-Semitism would be to say, let's actually call it anti-Jewishness, because Semites include Arabs. Okay, so technically, anti-Semitism I don't think is the best word, but anti-Jewish, which would mean that one should not discriminate unjustly against Jewish people in terms of their freedom of religion and their right to the practice of that religion. If we look at the Catholic definition of freedom, it says within due limits. So we can't just let everyone say, look, I'm going to do this because I'm religious and it means beating up my neighbor. That actually is contrary to the common good. So it wouldn't be discrimination against that person if you intervened and said, hey, you can't practice your religion if it involves beating up your neighbor. Likewise, and I don't want to use that analogy for the Jewish Palestinian situation, but it must mean that one can be a friend of the Jewish people and be anti-Semitic, right? And be able to criticize actions taken by Jews in the same way that we want to say we are pro and friends of Islam, but that doesn't mean we can be silent on many things that we disagree with. The problem is if we generate stereotypes and perpetuate negative images. That's what we've got to be working against. So I'm
I think
probably so helpful in answering it, but I think it's a kind of complicated nest of questions
I,
for sure.
and Dr. DaCosta, I mean, again, I listen to everything. Joe listens to everything going on out there. Okay. So I get it. I get it. But here's the thing, and this is my
Yeah.
view. Okay. Anecdotal as it might be, I don't care. Okay. I find that when I survey the landscape, Catholic Jewish dialogue seems to go a little in favor of one direction over the other. I don't believe that Catholics. This conversation. If some people out there so it might think that we're being anti-Semitic because we're even talking about, let's say, Jewish Catholic relationship. But here's my larger point. I'm just going to hand it over to Joe because we only have a little bit of time. Is that, but if you want authentic dialogue, which no Catholic that I know doesn't want authentic dialogue with the Jews.